The stars looked different from the bridge of the Resilient. Captain James Walker had seen them countless times before, but today they seemed colder, more distant. Maybe it was because of the massive alien fleet that blocked most of their light, their ships forming a dark wall across space. Walker stood straight, his hands clasped behind his back, as he watched the enemy approach. His crew worked quietly at their stations, each person knowing their duty. They had trained for this day, though they had hoped it would never come. The massive view screen showed hundreds of alien warships, their strange designs unlike anything humans had built. "Status report," Walker said, his voice steady despite the pressure weighing on his shoulders. The fate of Earth and all her colonies might depend on what happened in the next few hours. "Enemy fleet continuing their approach, sir," replied Officer Mike Smith from the sensor station. "They'll be within weapons range in 40 minutes. Walker nodded, remembering the history lessons that had shaped his entire career. 200 years ago, humanity had nearly destroyed itself in the Third World War. The devastation had changed everything. Cities turned to ash, continents became wasteland, and billions died. But from those ashes, humanity learned its most important lesson: the true cost of war. The ship's AI displayed more data about the incoming fleet. The aliens, especially the Taurians who led them, thought humans were weak. They had watched Earth's colonies spread across the stars without conflict. They had seen humans negotiate and compromise. They had witnessed Earth's ships avoid combat whenever possible. And they had made their biggest mistake. They had confused wisdom for weakness. "Message from Earth Command, sir," called out Jenny Ross, the communications officer. Her voice trembled slightly. "The Council wants to know if we should begin the evacuation." Walker looked at the wooden box mounted on the wall of his bridge. Inside it was a piece of burnt brick from old London, destroyed in the last war. Every Earth ship carried something similar, a reminder of what they had lost and what they had promised to never repeat. "Not yet," Walker said. "Patch me through to the fleet." The crew turned to look at him. They were young, most of them born in an era of peace. They had never seen real combat, had never had to fire their weapons in anger. Walker hoped they wouldn't have to start today. "All ships, this is Captain Walker," he began, his words reaching every Earth vessel in the defense line. 2 centuries ago, our ancestors made a choice. They looked at the ruins of our world and decided that enough was enough. They built memorials not to glory, but to loss. They taught their children not to seek war, but to understand its cost. He paused, watching as the alien fleet grew larger on the screen. Their weapons were powered up, their intentions clear. They expected an easy victory over these peaceful humans. But they also taught us to be ready. They built our ships not to conquer, but to protect. They trained us not to attack, but to defend. And they made sure we would never forget why we choose peace. The alien fleet was close enough now that Walker could make out individual ship designs. Their weapons were impressive, their armor thick. They had probably won many battles, conquered many worlds, but they had never faced humans before. "Stand ready," Walker ordered. "Remember your training. Remember why we're here. And most importantly, remember what we're trying to prevent." The crew straightened in their seats. The Resilient hummed with power as her systems came fully online. She was a peacekeeping vessel, but she was still one of the most powerful ships ever built by human hands. "Enemy fleet entering weapons range in 5 minutes, Smith reported. Walker touched the wooden box on the wall, feeling the rough texture of the ancient brick inside. "Send the standard greeting," he ordered. "Let's give them one last chance to understand." As the message was transmitted, Walker wondered if the aliens could possibly comprehend what they were about to face. Humanity hadn't avoided war because they were afraid. They avoided it because they knew exactly what they were capable of. And if the aliens forced their hand today, they would learn that lesson too. The stars continued to dim as more alien ships filled the view. Walker took his command chair and waited. Sometimes the hardest part of avoiding war was being strong enough to give peace every possible chance, even when you knew that chance might be wasted. The United Earth Council chamber was silent as the alien message played. Dr. Anna Miller watched the faces around her, noting how each council member reacted to the Taurian ultimatum. The message was simple and brutal: surrender or face extinction. The speaker was a tall, armored alien with gray skin and multiple scars, marks of honor in their culture. "You have 6 Earth hours to submit to our rule," the Taurian commander said, his translator making his words clear but not hiding the contempt in his voice. "Your peaceful ways have made you weak. Accept our dominion, or we will show you the true meaning of war." The message ended, leaving the chamber in darkness for a moment before the lights came back up. Anna stood from her seat, smoothing her plain blue uniform. As Earth's leading expert on alien cultures, she had studied the Taurians for years. Now that knowledge might be the difference between peace and destruction. "Dr. Miller," the council leader said, "please share your analysis." Anna walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing. The wooden walls around them were carved with scenes from human history, not battles or victories, but moments of peace, of healing, of rebuilding. She drew strength from them as she began to speak. "The Taurians don't understand us," she said simply. "Their entire society is built around combat and conquest. They believe that any species that doesn't constantly fight must be weak. They've watched us for years, seeing how we solve problems through talk instead of violence. To them, this can only mean one thing: that we are afraid to fight." Murmurs filled the chamber. Anna waited for them to quiet before continuing. "But they've made a serious mistake. They never asked why we choose peace. They never looked deep enough into our history to understand what brought us here." She pressed a button on her tablet, and images appeared in the air around her. They showed Earth's past, the devastation of the Third World War, the burning cities, the dead worlds. "We don't avoid war because we can't fight," she said. "We avoid it because we know exactly what war really means." The council leader leaned forward. "What do you recommend?" "We should show them," Anna replied. "Operation History Lesson is ready. Captain Walker and the defense fleet can hold position while we implement it. The Taurians respect strength. Let's show them why the strongest warriors are the ones who choose not to fight." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some council members argued for immediate evacuation. Others wanted to try more diplomacy. Anna waited patiently. She had spent her life trying to understand other species, to build bridges between different ways of thinking. But sometimes understanding had to come through hard lessons. Her tablet beeped. A message from Tom Reed in communications. The quantum channels were ready. They could broadcast Earth's history to every ship in the alien fleet, show them exactly what they were challenging. Not just the battles, but the consequences. The radiation deserts, the lost generations, the price of victory. The council leader called for order. "Dr. Miller, are you certain this is the right course? Once we show them our past, there's no taking it back. Every species in the galaxy will know what we're capable of." Anna thought about her grandfather's stories. He had been a child during the last war, had seen things no one should ever see. He had taught her that peace wasn't just the absence of war. It was a choice you had to make every day, especially when it was hard. "They already think they know what we're capable of," she answered. "They think we're sheep hiding from wolves. They need to understand that we're more like lions who've learned there are better ways to use our strength." The council voted. The decision was made. Anna sent the signal to begin Operation History Lesson, then looked up at the ceiling star map. Somewhere up there, Captain Walker and his fleet were waiting, giving peace its last chance. She hoped the Taurians were wise enough to learn from humanity's mistakes instead of repeating them. The next few hours would show whether the aliens could understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their ships, but in their determination to never again walk the path that had almost destroyed them. Sometimes the hardest battles were the ones you chose not to fight. The holographic displays on the Resilience Bridge showed thousands of data streams firing at once. Captain Walker watched as humanity's darkest memories spread across space, carried by quantum channels to every ship in the alien fleet. Dr. Miller stood beside him, her face lit by the glow of ancient battles playing out in miniature before them. "They're receiving the transmissions," Officer Ross reported from her station. "All channels are open. The translation programs are working." The first images were simple ones, armies clashing with swords and spears, the beginnings of human warfare. But they quickly changed, showing the evolution of combat through the ages. Tanks rolling across burning fields, cities vanishing in flames, mushroom clouds rising into darkened skies. "Are we showing them everything?" Walker asked quietly. Miller nodded. "They need to understand. The Third World War, the death zones, the underground years, all of it. We're not just showing the weapons and the battles. We're showing them what came after." The broadcasts continued, now displaying the wastelands that had once been Earth's most beautiful places. The massive graves, the children born in darkness because the sky was too poisoned to see the sun. The last animals in their cages, species about to vanish forever. "Enemy fleet has stopped advancing," Smith called out. "Multiple ships are powering down their weapons." Walker touched the wooden box on his wall again, thinking of all the similar relics on all the human ships. Each one told a story of loss, of lessons learned at too high a price. Now those lessons were being shared with beings from other stars. The quantum feeds were showing the rebuilding now. The slow process of cleaning poisoned Earth. The first trees planted in dead soil. The years of work needed to make just one city livable again. The countless graves dug. The monuments built not to victory, but to loss. "Sir," Ross said, her voice shaking slightly, "we're getting responses. The alien ships, they're asking questions." Miller moved to the communication station, reading the incoming messages. "They want to know why we kept these records," she said. "Why we preserved memories of our failures instead of our victories." "Tell them," Walker said. "Tell them everything." The next phase of records began streaming out. The building of the peace memorials. The first United Earth Council meeting. The burning of the last weapons of mass destruction. The vows taken by the first captains of Earth's new fleet. Vows to protect, never to conquer. "More ships powering down weapons," Smith reported. 30% of the fleet now. 40%. 50% and climbing. The final set of images showed Earth as it was today. The rebuilt cities, designed to prevent war by bringing people together. The defense fleet, made to protect but never to attack. The education centers where every child learned about the past so they would never repeat it. "Message from the Taurian flagship," Ross announced. "Their admiral wants to speak with us." Walker straightened his uniform. "Put them through." The alien admiral appeared on the main screen. His battle armor looked less impressive now, his scars less like badges of honor and more like warnings unheeded. "Your species," he said slowly, "you have done something we thought impossible." "What's that?" Walker asked. "You defeated war itself," the admiral replied. "We thought you avoided battle out of weakness. But you mastered it, conquered it, and then chose to put it aside." He paused, his alien features showing something that might have been respect. "How many worlds have you could have taken, with your technology, your understanding of total war?" "All of them," Walker said simply. "That's why we chose not to." Miller stepped forward. "Admiral, humanity learned its lesson through pain and loss. We're offering you the chance to learn it through wisdom instead." The admiral was quiet for a long moment. Around his ship, more and more of the alien fleet was powering down their weapons. They had come expecting to find sheep, only to discover lions who had learned that peace required more strength than war. "Perhaps," the admiral said finally, "it is time for my people to learn some new ways of measuring strength." Walker looked at the wooden box on his wall one last time. Today, It reminded him not just of humanity's past, but of its purpose. They had not forgotten how to fight. They had learned when not to. "We're ready to talk," he said, "whenever you're ready to listen." The Taurian High Command's message cut through the brief moment of hope like a knife. Despite half their fleet standing down, their leader had made his choice. "Your tricks and old stories mean nothing." The High Commander's voice boomed across all channels. "If you will not fight, then you will fall. The attack begins now." Walker watched as the remaining alien ships launched their first strike against New Haven, Earth's largest colony. The settlement held over 2 million people, all of them about to face the fury of a species that still believed war was the only answer. "Sir," Ross called out, her voice steady now. "Governor Thompson of New Haven is on the line." Walker nodded. "Put her through." "Captain Walker," the governor's calm voice filled the bridge. "We're ready here. Operation Exodus is complete." A small smile crossed Walker's face. The aliens were about to learn another lesson about humanity. They didn't just prepare for peace, they prepared for every possibility. The Taurian ships entered New Haven's atmosphere, their weapons blazing at full power. They struck government buildings, power plants, and what they thought were military bases. The explosions lit up the night side of the planet like new stars being born. "Enemy ground forces launching," Smith reported. "Estimated 10,000 troops in the first wave." Walker and his crew watched in silence. The aliens would find their victory hollow. On the surface, drop ships landed in empty streets. Armored troops burst into abandoned buildings. Weapons swept across deserted parks and squares. New Haven was empty. Not just the buildings, but everything that mattered. The people, the animals, the food, the technology, all gone. Evacuated through underground tunnels and emergency shelters built decades ago, just in case this day ever came. "Sir," Ross said, "we're getting confused transmissions from the Taurian ground forces. They don't understand." Miller stepped closer to the screen, watching the alien soldiers move through the empty city. "They expected resistance," she said. "They wanted us to fight back. This scares them more than any weapon could." The Taurian troops found nothing but empty homes with empty rooms. Family photos still hung on walls. Meals sat uneaten on tables. It looked like everyone had simply stood up and walked away, taking with them everything that made a civilization work. More messages from the ground teams, Ross reported. They found the nurseries. Walker knew what they'd discovered. Every human colony had nurseries, not just for children, but for the future itself. Seeds of every plant, samples of every animal, culture samples of every beneficial microbe. All carefully preserved, all safely evacuated. "They're not just finding empty rooms," Miller said softly. "They're finding proof that we planned for this, that we knew exactly what might come, and made sure we could walk away without losing who we are." The Taurian High Commander's voice came through again, but this time it held something new. Uncertainty. "What trickery is this? Where are your warriors? Where are your people? Face us and fight." Walker pressed a button on his chair, opening a channel. "We don't need to fight you," he said simply. "You see, we learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to win is to make sure there's nothing worth taking." Hours passed as more Taurian forces landed, searching desperately for something to fight, something to conquer. Instead, they found only echoes and shadows. Empty buildings that would need massive resources to maintain. Infrastructure that would cost fortunes to repair. A colony designed to become a burden to any invader. "Message from Earth Command," Ross said. "The other colonies report successful evacuations. No casualties." Walker nodded. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for this possibility. Every colony had escape routes. Every settlement had evacuation plans. They had made sure that if war ever came again, they could save what really mattered: their people. "Sir," Smith called out, "long-range sensors show the Taurian supply ships are holding position. They appear to be turning around." "Of course they are," Miller said. They're starting to understand. You can't conquer a people who know how to let go of everything except what truly matters. Walker looked at the scenes of confused alien soldiers on his screen. Send them one last message, he ordered. Tell them that whenever they're ready to talk about peace, we'll be waiting. And remind them, sometimes the strongest choice is knowing when to walk away. Tom Reed's fingers moved quickly across his console in the Quantum Communications Center. The room was dark except for the soft blue glow of holographic screens, each one showing a different transmission being prepared. Dr. Miller stood behind him, watching as he worked to share humanity's most personal messages with the alien fleet. The translation programs are ready, Tom said, his voice soft but determined. These stories, are you sure we should share them? They're different from the historical records, more personal. Miller touched the screen showing an old woman's face, her eyes filled with memories of darker days. These are the voices they need to hear, she said, not just the facts and figures of war, but the human cost, the real stories. The first transmission began. An old man appeared on screens throughout the alien fleet, his wrinkled face showing years of pain and wisdom. He spoke of being a child during the last war, of hiding in bunkers while the sky burned above. He talked about losing his parents, his home, and his belief in humanity's goodness, and then finding that belief again in the people who helped rebuild. Multiple ships are receiving the transmission, Tom reported. They're not trying to block it. More stories followed. A woman spoke of her grandmother's diary, found in the ruins of old Paris, telling of the days when food ran out and hope seemed lost. A farmer showed the fields his family had spent 3 generations cleaning of radiation, turning dead earth back into living soil. A doctor described treating children born with the marks of war still in their genes. Incoming message, Tom said suddenly. It's from one of the Taurian ships. They're asking for more. Miller leaned forward, reading the alien text. The message was from a common soldier, not a commander. It asked why humans would keep such painful memories, why they would choose to remember their darkest days. Send them the next set, Miller ordered. Show them why we remember. The transmissions continued. Now they showed the rebuilding. People coming together across old battle lines to help each other survive. Former enemies working side by side to plant new forests. Children from different nations learning each other's languages, determined to never let misunderstanding lead to war again. More messages coming in, Tom said, his screens filling with alien text, not just from the Taurians now. The other species in their fleet. They're all watching, all asking questions. Miller began answering them, explaining how humanity had changed, how they had learned to measure strength not in weapons or conquered territory, but in the ability to help others. How they had discovered that the hardest power to master was the power to choose peace even when war seemed easier. Look at this, Tom called out, pointing to one of his screens. The quantum channels were showing something unexpected. Alien soldiers were sharing the human stories with their own people back home. The memories of Earth's past were spreading across the stars, carried by the Taurian fleet hung in space like a broken web. Ships that once moved in perfect formation now drifted in confused clusters. Captain Walker watched from the Resilience Bridge as another group of alien vessels powered down their weapons and turned away from Earth's defense line. Sir, Smith called from his station, 30 more ships have broken formation. That makes over 60% of their fleet that's standing down. The main screen showed the Taurian command ship, still holding position with its most loyal followers. But even there, something was changing. The quantum channels were filled. 6 months after the Almost War, the old Geneva War Memorial welcomed its first alien visitors. The Taurian delegation walked slowly through the quiet halls, their steps echoing on the ancient stone floors. Dr. Miller led them, watching as they stopped to study each exhibit, each reminder of humanity's violent past and peaceful present. The young Taurian officer who had helped prevent the war, now appointed as their new ambassador, paused before a wall of names. The memorial listed every person who had died in the Third World War. The wall stretched up into darkness, too tall to see its end. "So many," he said softly. "And this was just one war." Miller nodded. "One war too many. That's why this place exists, to make sure we never forget the cost." She led them to the next hall, where Captain Walker waited beside a new exhibition being installed. The fresh display showed two stories side by side. The day the Taurian fleet arrived at Earth, and the day they chose to stand down. Between these images, screens showed the shared stories that had changed everything. Personal tales of loss and hope from both human and alien soldiers filled the air with quiet voices. "The Galactic Peace Archive is already being built," Walker said, gesturing to a hologram of the massive structure taking shape in orbit. "Your people's stories will be preserved alongside ours. Different histories, different worlds, but the same lessons." The ambassador touched one of the screens, watching as a human child's drawing of peace appeared. Next to it, a Taurian child's similar artwork had been added. "My own daughter made this," he said. After hearing the human stories, she asked why we had waited so long to learn this lesson. They moved through the memorial, passing the sections showing humanity's rebuilding after the war. The aliens stopped often, asking questions about how people had overcome their fears and hatred to work together. Miller explained patiently, showing them the small steps that had led to big changes. "Your colonies," one of the Taurian scientists asked. "They are being resettled." Walker smiled. "Yes, but differently now. We're building them together, humans and Taurians working side by side. Your engineering skills combined with our experience in creating peaceful communities. The new New Haven will be the first truly interspecies settlement." They reached the memorial's heart, a simple room with a single burning flame. Around it, soil from Earth's worst battlefields had been placed, now growing with flowers from both worlds. The Taurians stood quietly, understanding the symbolism without need for explanation. "We received your invitation to join the Earth Defense Force," the ambassador said after a long moment. "Many were surprised that you would trust us so soon." Miller touched the wall where new text was being added, the story of how peace had been chosen over war. "Trust has to start somewhere," she said, "and who better to help defend peace than those who have just discovered its value?" The delegation moved to the memorial's final chamber. Here, visitors could add their own promises to the millions already recorded. The ambassador stepped forward, placing his hand on the recording crystal. "I promise," he said clearly, "to teach my children that strength comes in many forms, and the greatest of these is the strength to choose peace." The crystal glowed, storing his words alongside generations of human promises. Outside the memorial, the sun was setting over the rebuilt city. Transport ships crossed the sky, carrying materials for the new colonies and the Galactic Peace Archive. On the streets below, human and alien children played together in the parks that had once been war zones. "There's an old human saying," Walker said as they watched the peaceful scene. "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now." He turned to the ambassador. "The same is true for peace." The ambassador looked at his people, seeing how they stood differently now, less rigid, less focused on showing strength through force. "We spent thousands of years learning how to win wars," he said. "Now we will learn how to win peace." Miller smiled as she watched more visitors enter the memorial, humans and aliens together, all coming to learn the hardest but most important lesson in history. "That's why humans steer clear of war," she said softly. "Not because we can't fight, but because we learn there are better ways to be strong." The eternal flame burned behind them, its light now reflecting not just humanity's hope for peace, but a new hope that spread across the stars, that any species could learn to turn away from war if they were brave enough to try.